Hi, I'm Austin Wintory, and this is my 4th episode of Composer Points of View, for which I spoke to 10 friends, colleagues, and all-around incredible composers to get their perspective on questions that don't seem to come up very often. For this one, I asked them, have you ever felt supremely lucky in your career? And what I didn't mean is just generically good fortune or good tidings happening, but the idea that something incredible happened and they knew in their heart, I can't take credit for this. This is something beyond me. This was the perfect time, perfect place, just meeting the right person in a very coincidental way, getting helped by someone in a manner that I couldn't control, things along those lines, to really get a sense of gauging just how under our own control our careers really are. The flip side of the way I asked the question was, have you ever felt like, wow, I just dodged a bullet, in the sense that something didn't happen and it was also not under your control and you just felt very, very lucky for the lack of that thing happening? So here are their answers.
Yeah, you know what? I think honestly, I can say that about everything that I have right now. It's like, wow, what I did was I showed up, I did the work. Like I did the work, but I definitely feel that way about joining Blake's world, like that was a certain, like that was definitely, I always think of things as like working in my league or working in your league or in one's league and then working out of one's league. And I think that the juxtaposition of both of those are what really helps. Like, if there's no challenge, there's no change. I got that from my Peloton. Like, it's like no challenge, no change. Okay, because you're like dying. But I feel like honestly the recent show that I'm doing, Kung Fu, that was something that, and this is probably not as good of an answer as like comparably as the one that I had before, but just the whole idea of like I did work with those people for like on a different show 5 years prior, so it wasn't just like a random let's get a Chinese female composer to do this. It just so happened that those were some things I identify as, and I'd already worked with these people and they were making a show with a female Chinese lead, in the show Kung Fu. But what's interesting about it is I think that's the benefits that I've gotten from that, and that's not like, I financial stability or visibility or credit. It's not any of that. The kind of the interesting, and this is probably way different from the answer you were expecting, but the thing that I think that I've been benefiting, or like, wow, that really worked out for me, is because I've sort of connected with my Asian heritage, my Chinese culture and heritage that I didn't really grow up having a lot of. Like my dad's Chinese, and so and my mom's Caucasian. She's white. She's from Canada, so I'm half. And what's interesting is like I wasn't like ashamed of being Chinese growing up, but I just didn't really have like a celebratory, we are Chinese and we do all of these, culturally specific things. And what's crazy is that in doing the show Kung Fu, it's like I'm like, oh, I remember I used to go to my grandmother's house and she would do that and all that. And so there's like this connection to a heritage.
You see, this was the only one that got me, because I was like, I've lucked out permanently, right? And every composer always feels that anyway. Oh my God, I've lucked out. I can't believe I'm doing this. But from a point of view of have I ever dodged a bullet, there's only one thing that's not really dodging a bullet. I remember I'd just come to LA, I was producing a band, and I was over here, and I was like, oh, this is quite fun. I was working on a UK drama while I was here. I'd hired out a studio. And I've met this director, and young, I was young, and he said, well, so, I'd love you to score this film and blah, blah, blah. And it just felt a bit weird. And again, coming from the UK, I've never experienced any of the LA and the American side of things. So he was saying, oh, well, look, score this. So I was like, well, sure, it looks like quite a fun movie. I'll do some stuff. Anyway, so I did a couple of cues for him. And he said, oh yeah, it's great. If you could just massage this cue. And I'm like, and if you're pitching for a film or if you're doing stuff, you tend to be chatting away, saying, well, look, it's just to give you an idea of what's going on in my mind. If it's not right, fair enough, it's not right. He said, no, love it. So, but if you could just tweak this, I was like, but it's pitch, So I was like, well, okay, I'll tweak it just to show you how I can adapt to notes and so on. So I did that. And it was just very weird. Like 3 days later, it was silence. Then he comes like, oh, I absolutely love it. And it just, I don't know. I normally follow my instinct and my gut. And it's like, look, if I like someone, I'll work with them. If I like their project, I'll work with them. If they're a dick, I probably won't, because there's only so many hours you have in a day and you just want it to be fun. And anyway, so he tried to drag this on for about 2 weeks. And as I say, I was producing this band at the time anyway. So it was a case of, well, look, I'll do this, but it takes a while to get your brain into gear. And then the dick sent me an email, but it wasn't for me. It was for another composer saying, I really like what you did in that bit there. I was just wondering if you could tweak it like this. I was like, oh my God, he's been doing exactly the same to someone else. And again, because I'm not indoctrinated in the ways of America, I didn't realize that this is probably perfectly normal. So he goes, so I thought, well, do I reply to this? Or do I call him on it? Or do I just politely, be British and go, terribly sorry, a bit busy at the moment. So I called him on it anyway. It was quite refreshing, liberating. And he goes, oh yeah. I'm not going to do the accent, but he said, I really like what you've done. It's just, I really feel I owe it to this other guy. I said, you never told me about this other guy. You had this other person doing a month and a half of changes for this inverted commas pitch. If I hadn't got that email, I still don't think I would have done it, because, say, I was following my instinct and I'd said, look, this feels weird, and and so on. But it's just that kind of verification of like, what the hell? You've had someone work on this for a month and a half of a pitch for 2 cues. And it just kind of makes you think, you just got to go with how you feel, because otherwise I would have been spending ages and ages and ages just trying to get a flipping film at the start of my career. It's like, kill me now. So it's probably not quite the answer that you're after as far as have I ever lucked out and dodged a bullet, but it was a hell of a learning curve from the point of view of how much arseholes can be sometimes.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, just thinking immediately of what you're saying, I think actually I got lucky by a job that I got about 3-4 years ago, and that catapulted me onto quite a few other, it opened up a lot for me professionally. But in terms of dodging a bullet analogy, I think I did a project. This is not strictly answering your question, I'm not sure if it is, but I did a project about 5 or 6 years ago. And I have a habit of taking on projects where I'm setting myself up for failure, where I'll throw myself in at the deep end where I don't quite know what I'm doing. And that really excites me, but it's potentially incredibly dangerous, where I'm taken out of my comfort zone. And so I took on a job. The phone rang, I got offered this project. It was to write a musical. I thought, oh my God, I have to take this job on. It's just the most incredible, unique, amazing project. And I didn't lie to the director. He asked me some questions. Can you write songs? I said, yes. And I'd never written songs before. He said, can you write in 5 different languages, other than 4 or 5 languages other than English? I said yes, and I only speak and write English. It's a musical. You have to work with children, and can you take this on? And so I said yes, and the time scale was incredible. I had to write 6 or 7 songs, all fully produced, lyrically, melodically, everything produced, finished in 3.5 weeks, ready to go out to film in India in 5 weeks from that moment. And so I had to write these songs, send them off to these children to learn and sing. Some of them don't even read, okay? And then fly out with the crew to Mumbai and work with these kids on location before the monsoon hit. And about 2 weeks into the job, I hadn't written anything, and I had a week and a half to go, and it was the most stressful, painstaking situation that I actually felt that was the one time I thought, I'm going to be found out. I can't do this. The gun's at my head. And I would cry. I was literally, I swear, I kid you not, Austin, I would cry myself to sleep at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning thinking, I can't do this, suffering from imposter syndrome. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to put a team around me. And I found this lyricist, amazing lyricist, just breaking the situation down bit by bit and thinking about the task ahead and not thinking too much into the future. And I wrote these songs and I got through the job, sent off each song for approval, sent off the songs to this lyricist in Mumbai, who then took my lyrics and melody. And for me, it was important to retain the integrity of the rhyming and the meter and the phrasing and the musicality of it all. And he translated it into Urdu, Marathi, Hindi, Gujarati, all these different languages and dialects, and sent it back to me for approval. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. And it was just one thing at a time. And then I flew out to I sent the music out. And of course, everything that could go wrong in Mumbai went wrong. We had a week to record the songs in a professional studio, and I had booked in slots with each of the families and the children's and the teachers and so on to come in at various days to perform their songs. And the wrong kids would turn up on the wrong day. The monsoon hit, so we were trapped in our hotel for 48 hours, couldn't move. The water was knee high. We were filming on location. We had 1,000 children, teenagers, in a school playing field. And we had a 2-hour window in which to film a song, this climactic song. And the headmistress came out because the rain had stopped. And we thought the sun had come out, and the headmistress said, "What are you doing with all these kids?" I said, "Well, we're filming." I said, "Yeah, the snakes are going to come out after the rain, you know."
This is like biblical.
It was biblical. So everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I just thought, and I was the first 48 hours of the trip, you know, I would turn up to the studio at 8 a.m. ready for a 10 a.m. start, because I'm used to studio bookings, everything turning up, happening on time. People wouldn't turn up until 4 hours later. And I just thought, you know what? It doesn't matter. It will get through it. And it taught me so much. And I just let it go, breathe, let it go, calm down. And just if they turned up on the wrong day, we just sang a different song. You know, if they didn't know the lyrics and they hadn't learned it, we'd spend an hour trading. You know, record the same phrase 10 times, 20 times, and we got through it. And so I really, really dodged a bullet on that job. And I felt that after that experience, I thought, if I can get through this, which I did, I can get through anything. And everything else seems trivial after that project. So it taught me a lot about myself and about how to work with people and how to handle people. And I guess I got really lucky because it ended up being a real success. And thank God I didn't throw the towel in.
You know, I'm not entirely sure that this will answer the question exactly the way you want, but I'll just give the rundown. You know, just getting hired on Call of Duty, I think, was just such a huge jump for me personally in the tier of projects that I was now privy to. And just to put that in context, so like I had worked for 2 years on Star Wars First Assault, so that's got to be like what, 2011 through 2013. And then the Disney buyout and like the layoffs happened. So that was like, all right, well, I just kind of wasted 2 years. That's awesome. And then the music basically thrown away, never to be seen again. In like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, like the vault at the end, that's where the First Assault score lives, right, to this day. But then, you know, I got pretty lucky and I got hired for Dead Island 2. And I spent about 2 years on that. It was a lot of sketching, a lot of like exploration. And we settled on a very something that you would never think that I would write, but it was all California rock music from 3 different eras. So it was an open world game with 3 different regions, I guess. The Redwinds up north, and then San Francisco, and then Los Angeles. And each one of them was like a different era of California-based. It was always in California, if you didn't know geographically. But it was all different California rock music. So SF was more like the 60s psychedelic rock, and the Redwinds was more like heavy. LA was a little bit more like Red Hot Chili Peppers with a little bit of like sort of what do you call it? Like a brass trio, like trumpet, trombone, and sax. And I finished the score. It was like, I think 90 minutes, something like that. We recorded everything. I was very happy with that. I was doing the implementation on it as well, just like I did with First Assault. At the time, sort of innovative approach to how we were doing the multiplayer component of the music. And then the studio shut down. This time with the added bonus of they declared insolvency, I guess, in Germany, which means that like they could continue operating for like a different game they were doing, but they were like, well, we're not paying any of the bills that are left, so you're screwed basically. I never got my like next paycheck, which would have been like $40,000 or some crazy thing like that.
Wow. And
I just moved to Seattle at the time. Obviously moving to a new city when you're not like extremely stable financially is quite challenging. And yeah, it was rough. Financially, I was just like, I don't know what am I gonna do? Like I got to get something. This is kind of crazy. And thankfully I kind of held it together for a little while, and I ended up doing this is around the time when I did my first GDC talk, which was actually about Lara Croft's Temple of Osiris. And I think from that, I was able to secure a meeting with the audio director of Sledgehammer, and we talked at GDC. We had a great conversation. And from that, kind of more meetings happened, and eventually they brought me on. I actually didn't even have to demo for that game, because they were like, you know what, let's just hire this guy. I was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. But I think that's probably the luckiest, in terms of like the perfect thing at the perfect time. I don't know what I would have done if it weren't for that happening like right just then.
That's an easy one for me, which I think is kind of all like, I think doing this job, I'd love to pretend it's all like really hard work and skill and talent, but there's a big element of luck in there as well. And the more work you do, the more stuff you do, the more you create the opportunities for luck, but you still need luck. And I think my thing that I was very lucky was working with Ridley Scott, because that was a huge big change for me. And I'd had all these like weird planets align, where I'd done a short film with his editor before, and his editor had been like tried to introduce me to Ridley, but Ridley always wants to make his own decisions type thing. So this is his great editor, Pietro Scalia, and then he's just come off a film, and he's like looking for a new sort of composer, like wants to change things up, which like first bit of luck sort of thing. Second thing is it's a relatively low budget movie for him, so there's not studio pressure of like, we need a big established name, big track record. Second bit of luck. Third bit of luck, the editing in London. Just happened to be editing in London. I live in London, makes things easier. Fourth bit of luck, I have just scored another movie, and I did a very interesting score for it, and then the producers decided they hated it, and I had to rescore the whole movie in like about 10 days, which was unbelievably stressful. And disappointing because I really thought the work I'd done previously was really exciting and different. But I then had all this like sort of interesting music kicking around, which I passed on to Pietro, and he's like, this stuff is perfect for our film in terms of like temp and getting the tone right. So he started just putting it in for tone. And then fifth bit of luck is Ridley had just seen this movie I did called The Awakening, which to that point had not done a lot. It's sort of come and gone. But he came in one day just raving about this film to Pietro, saying, you've got to see this film, it's amazing, the score's brilliant. And then Pietro, just the other bit of luck, knew it was by me and says, that's the guy I've told you about before. And so we had a meeting, which I just thought would be a cool meeting with Ridley. He asked me about, what was my life and my career. And I kind of, sort of said I worked in TV for like, 10, 20 years or whatever, just doing stuff. And he's like, that's how I learned how to direct. I did it through just making adverts and just everyday learning stuff. And he's like, you've done your 10,000 hours in the garage, son, kind of thing. I mean, he literally said that. He didn't say the word son, but he's trying to make it feel a bit more like a movie. And
would have worked if you hadn't immediately peeled back the curtain.
And then I thought that'd be it. I just thought, well, that was really cool. I got to meet Ridley Scott. I got a cool story about meeting Ridley Scott. And then I get a call a week later saying, right, he wants you to do the movie. You've got to be at the edit in an hour. And I was still in bed and I was just like, shit. And then from there, it kind of, it just all sort of went bonkers because, once you've got him saying, I support this guy, I like his vision and his art, his work, then everyone else kind of like suddenly thinks, oh, hang on a tick. And again, that was, quite a lot of, it kind of came through the work but it's still, I'm very conscious that I was quite lucky.
Yeah, it's a great example because you couldn't have forced any of those steps to happen if you had somehow tried. Like you can't just will those things. And that's a perfect example of kind of what the heart of what I was asking.
The thing that's interesting about it though, for me, is like the key thing is like with the film, The Awakening.
We're older and wiser. And I think when we look at things, it's difficult because there's a lot of our friends and that have they've got the best talent in the world. They can write the best themes. They excel at their production levels, and the opportunities just not come to get the gig, and it is painful and it is annoying, and there is no. I'm sure every day you get an email. How do I do this? How do I get into this industry? If we all knew, we would be. I'd have my Oscars up there. I got nothing. All I get is the nomination certificates. But
I know exactly what you mean.
It's there is no path, but the only thing we can do is just make sure we're prepared. And that to me is the important thing, because it's. When that opportunity does come, you got to be ready for it, and you got to know.
So yeah, I'll start with the last question, the flip side, I guess, which is just, I think sometimes you get a call out from your agent about a job, and it's like maybe somebody's been fired, and they need you to start next week, and it runs to, it clashes with all the other projects you've got going on, and you're like, but it's such an amazing job, I'll interview for it anyway, and then I haven't got it or whatever. I can't say what it is, but I'm actually kind of delighted because I think, if I'd have got that job, I just wouldn't have had a life because I've already signed up for these, I've got a full schedule, and I would have had to really squeeze it in, and I'd have just been cramming too much. So it's kind of, I think it would have compromised everything if I'd taken on that mega dream job that just suddenly showed up. Because I think, I feel so lucky to be in a position of being offered jobs now that seem to be coming through because people have heard Loki, whatever, and it's definitely changed the landscape of my career. And the flip side to that is kind of navigating it and making sure that you're making the stepping stones that are kind of going to sustain your career, I guess. And that's always so difficult. Like, no one can predict what the script's going to turn out like, and how good it's going to. Well, you can. There's lots of things that indicate these things, but there's often, you know, misleading, and things aren't what they seem. And so, yeah, it feels like a difficult journey sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's for a lot of my career, I feel like getting lucky has kind of like factored into a lot of it, and it's not quite as interesting to talk about. Like, you know, I could say like, oh, getting the Celeste gig was like super lucky, and like, yeah, like that's kind of one of those things that is like kind of obvious of like, yeah, that was my big break. Like, that's kind of what made my career in some way. But I think the bullet that I dodged, kind of that coincided with that, kind of relates to the answer to my first question a little bit, where, you know, it was kind of talking about trajectories and like, you know, the trajectory that I was getting on. And for me, I feel like there was this trajectory for me as a in-house designer in AAA studios and stuff. And I was, you know, on the rise in my career. Like, I was, you know, getting more and more sort of like bigger profile gigs as a designer. And I think there was, you know, a path where I could have, you know, eventually gone on to like lead a AAA team or something at Ubisoft, like however many years down the road, and maybe that would have been interesting, but I don't think that's where my path needed to go. And so I feel like just deciding to go independent and focusing my career around you know, just composing and, you know, working with independent developers, like really just kind of honing into that indie space, like that I feel like was a big bullet that I dodged in a way of like, I found my place where I feel at home. You know, working with the teams that I do now, like that's my comfy space now, is I found that of like, you know, working with these small teams, and it's so much better for me mentally, creatively, than doing any of the big AAA production stuff that I was doing before.
Honestly, I feel like my entire career has been extremely lucky. The fact that I find myself in the position that I'm in as the composer for Supergiant Games, like the in-house composer and audio director, I mean, that thing, honestly, you know, to me seems just like luck that I happened into this position, had a friend who asked me to do it. And then the other aspect of it to me is just, you know, every game, when people respond well to a particular game, I feel like a lot of that has to do with the moment that it is released, the precise moment it's released, the precise way in which it's released, all these factors that you can't control. You can control your work on the game and the teams, like you can control how much you put into it while you're working on it. But once it's out of your hands, there is, I think, a great deal of luck involved in any sort of public response to something that you released. So the fact that people have responded well to the music from the games, responded well to the games themselves, I think there is a good deal of luck in that. Even though I really am proud of the work, I've been proud of other work that I've done that no one has heard of, you know, so honestly, I think there's a whole bunch of luck involved in that.
I've made that point a million times over the last 10 years since Journey came out, where I said, if Journey came out today, I don't think anybody would stand out anywhere near to the degree, like so much of the luck of what happened there was due to when it came out. And I think Bastion has a similar, especially musically, like there just was so little to compare it to that in the world of games that you could have done a lesser job and probably still drawn a lot of ears, because there was just so novel relative to the goings on and like what the cliches were. As it turns out, you crushed it, and it's like loaded with all kinds of goodies, but it's like it almost didn't have to be, to it in a funny sense, because it was by luck of the draw, the thing that felt right at that time and place was just so different from everything else going on. And if that game, if we lived in an alternate universe where somehow the general trends of the industry, because we're in a weird chicken and egg with that, where I think like Bastion would maybe stand out less today because there's other things like it. But the reason there's other things like it is because Bastion inspired other people to do things like that. So it's sort of like if you had never existed, maybe there still to this day would be nothing that's quite like that, because it took somebody to plant that flag and others to sort of emulate it or draw inspiration from it or shamelessly copy it or whatever.
Well, what you're talking about is control. Do we have control over what is around us? And it is tied to your previous question, because I told myself a lie when I wanted my career to go further. This was at the waning days of Battlestar. And that lie was, well, you can push your career further if you just work hard. And that created this self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. Oh, you didn't get that big movie? Why? You didn't work harder. Work harder. Demo more. Go out more. Hustle more. Because you have control. It's not luck. You have control. And if you have bad luck, in my head it was like, don't say it was bad luck. Say it was your fault. You could have navigated through that had you worked harder. Well, that is a recipe for disaster. So one of the things that I've come to recognize, and again, going back to my mid-30s, I realized, and I just shifted, I work really hard, but I also relinquish some control. That there are some things that we just have no control over, and it works to our benefit, it works to our detriment. That's just the roulette game of life. But embracing that to a degree is, I think, a big part of having a career in a freelance industry, and frankly, just being an adult in the world.